And we also have a circle of the church year, and we know that we are in the season of Easter, this white season here, and we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th Sunday now of the season of Easter. So is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5. Sometimes I have to check. All right, so get settled, get your body ready, get your eyes and ears ready, and your heart. There was once someone who said such wonderful things and did such amazing things that people began to follow him. And as they followed him, they wondered who he was. And they couldn't help themselves. They just had to ask him. And one of the times when they asked him who he was, he said, "I am light." Let's enjoy the light. I see the love of God in you, the light of Christ comes shining through, and I am blessed to be with you, O holy child of God. You ready for a story? Well, we're in the middle of the big story of Easter. And I'll start again at the beginning. On that first Easter, it was the women who were going to the tomb because they wanted to be close to Jesus. They were bringing things to finish the burial, and among the women were 3 Marys: Mary, the mother of James, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene, who wasn't a mother but was a good friend. And as they walked, they wondered how they would get in and who would help them roll away the stone. But when they got there, they found that the stone was rolled away. And when they looked in, they saw, they saw nothing. Nothing except for the white cloth that had wrapped the body. They turned and ran back to tell the other disciples, but they were not believed. But Peter, being Peter, he jumped up and he ran towards the tomb. And some say John ran too and got there before him, and together they went into the tomb. And in the tomb, they could feel Jesus's presence in his absence. But he was gone, truly gone. Now, you can see that Mary Magdalene had come and followed them and was outside the tomb, weeping. Peter and John ran back to tell the others, but Mary stayed there. And as she stood there, through her tears, she heard, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she looked up and she saw 2 men dressed in dazzling white. They said, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is risen, as he said. Go and tell the others to meet him in Galilee." And then they were gone. But Mary lingered. And another voice, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She turned, and supposing him to be the gardener, she said, "Tell me where they have taken him, so I may go and take him away." Mary. As soon as he said her name, she knew that it was he. She must have gone towards him because he said, "Do not hold on to me. I am risen, but not yet ascended to my Father." And then he was gone. And Mary ran to tell the disciples what had happened. And on that same day, that first Easter in the afternoon, some of the followers of Jesus were walking away from Jerusalem towards the town of Emmaus. And as they were walking, they must have been shaking their heads in wonder at all that had happened. The cross, the empty tomb, what did it mean? And as they were walking and talking, a stranger came alongside them and walked for a while listening, and then said, "What are you talking about?" They looked at him and said, "You must be the only person in all of Jerusalem that doesn't know what has happened these past 3 days. The cross, the empty tomb, it's all so much." Jesus looked on them kindly and said, "You foolish hearts." And then he began to open the scriptures to them. "Do you remember how we were trapped in Egypt and how Moses led us through the waters into freedom? Do you remember how we were trapped in our freedom in the wilderness and God gave us the 10 commandments to show us the way? Do you remember when we were trapped in exile in Babylon and the prophets said that a child will lead us and that someone must die?" As he was talking, they had reached the village of Emmaus, and the stranger was about to go on when the disciples invited him into the inn to share supper with them. And at supper, he took the bread, gave thanks to God, and broke it, and gave it to them. And in that moment, in the breaking of the bread, they knew it was he, and then he was gone. They sat there for a while and said, "Didn't our hearts burn within us as he was talking to us and opening the scriptures?" And then they left and walked back towards Jerusalem, marveling, to tell the others what had happened. And we remember how the disciples were gathered in a room with the doors shut tightly because they were afraid that the Roman soldiers would come and take them away as they had taken Jesus. And suddenly they heard a voice, "Peace be with you." They looked up and it was he. At first they thought it might be a ghost, but then he started talking to them. He showed them his wounds and he ate some fish. After they had done that, he opened the scriptures to them as he had to the ones who had walked on the road to Emmaus with him. And then, "Peace be with you," and he was gone. And we remember how Thomas was not there that time. And when they told him what had happened, he said, "I do not believe you." Thomas had doubt in his bones. He said, "I won't believe until I touch the wounds with my own hands." And who could blame him? The disciples were stretching to be able to understand Jesus in this new way. About 8 days passed, and then they were gathered once again in a room with the door shut, and this time Thomas was with them. Again, "Peace be with you." And this time Jesus walked directly up to Thomas, held out his hands and said, "Touch my wounds." All Thomas could do was fall to his knees and say, "My Lord and my God." Jesus looked at him for a few minutes and then said, "Do you believe only because you have seen?" And then he looked around at the disciples and said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." And then he was gone. And this week, we remember how the disciples left Jerusalem and headed north to Galilee as Jesus had told them. It was a long journey, about 100 kilometers. It took about 4 days to walk there. And when they got to Galilee, they went to the Sea of Galilee to rest. This was a place that many of them had known as boys. It was a place where they had fished with their fathers. Suddenly, Peter stood up and said, "I'm going fishing." Then the others got up and helped him prepare the boat. They cast off into the waters of the Sea of Galilee. But all that night, they caught no fish. But the sounds and the smells of the lake comforted them. It felt like home. And as the morning broke, pink sky into blue, they noticed that there was a person standing on the shore beside a fire. They could tell because they could see the smoke blowing up from the fire, and they could see the red glow of the charcoal embers of the fire. "Have you caught anything?" What else could they say? No. So he said, "Cast your nets on the other side." Well, what did they have to lose? So they pulled out their empty nets, took them over to the other side of the boat, and dropped them in. They could feel the fish moving against the ropes of the nets. But John, he wasn't paying any attention to the fish. He was leaning forward and looking at the figure who was walking back and forth on the shore. He said to Peter, "It's the Lord." Peter stood up, jumped into the water, and swam towards the shore. He could feel his feet on the sand as he waded ashore. The others turned the boat and sailed towards the land. The net was so full of fish that it was too heavy for them to even bring into the boat, so they dragged it along behind them. As they got to the shore and went towards the fire, the stranger said, "Bring some fish." And as they gathered around the fire with the stranger, they knew that he was not a stranger. Everyone knew that it was Jesus, but they were afraid to say anything. "Have some breakfast," he said. There were some fish cooking on the fire, and he gave them fish to eat and bread. And they began to talk as they ate. Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Peter, do you love me?" "Yes, of course." "Feed my lambs." Then again, "Peter, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord." "Tend my sheep." Then again, "Peter, do you love me?" "Lord, you know that I do." "Then feed my sheep." Then Jesus began to talk to Peter about growing old and how in old age we need other people to help us. Sometimes people would tell us what to do, even though we didn't want them to. Later, the disciples wondered if Jesus was getting Peter ready for his death as an old man many years later in Rome. Then Jesus said, "Follow me." All of them? No, just Peter stood up, and the two of them walked along the shore of the lake, talking. Peter looked back and saw John following and said to Jesus, "What about this man? Will he die like all the rest of us?" Jesus said, "It is not for you to know such things." And then he was gone. So I wonder what part of this story you like best. Oh, the new part? Some of the other parts, I wonder. Who are you going to tell? Who are you telling about this? It's so exciting. I wonder what part's most important. You think this? Wonder. You think this? I wonder where you are in this story. What part of this story is about you? And I wonder about you and what part of this story is about your family, about being home, about being where you were as a child, going back to someplace that you love to be. I wonder. So now, the light of Christ has been shining through this whole session today in Godly Play. And now it's time to go out from the circle and to tell you that this light did not stay in that one place in that one time so long ago, because he changed the light so it can be in all places and in all times. So watch as I change the light. Oh, there it comes. It's coming up and it's going out to you, and it'll be with you as you walk through this week. This light will be with you always. And now for the blessing. May the Lord bless you and watch over you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look kindly on you and give you peace. Have a wonderful week, and thanks for being in the circle with me today. Bye for now.